to the Lend Your Voice 1000 Voices for Autism series, proudly brought to you by EK Foundation for Autism. Today is a beautiful Thursday in the month of August. It's our first episode in the month of August, and particularly, I am super excited about what this episode is going to feature. We are joined today by a lady who I consider to be nothing short of exceptional in her craft. She's built a career in the health and policy space, and to be honest, I am deeply honored and thrilled to be hosting this conversation with this amazing personality who has thrived in this space exceptionally well. As you can see, if you're joining us across all digital platforms, which we are currently streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, I'm doing the talking, and the other beautiful smile you can see is our amazing guest on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, drum rolls for the amazing Dr. Uche Anyamele, who's joining us today to discuss. Welcome, madam. How are you doing this beautiful afternoon?
I'm well. Thank you, Epic. Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here. I just want to say that I think most people know that I have expertise in international trade law and digital technology law. But I've had some time to do health law, and I've taught health law actually, and published in health law. But I do want to say I know that it's an aspect that affects everybody. And so there is, when people think carefully about health law, is something that I think every lawyer should have some sort of information on, but even go further if it's something that affects you, or a loved one, or you feel like this is something you can contribute to, then you go further. So yes, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Epic. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us. Very, I think when we have persons of this caliber, I like how they they get straight to the conversation immediately from the first introduction. It puts all of us on our seats. We know that we are about to have an amazing conversation where we're going to be educated and schooled very significantly. So again, we want to say a very big thank you to you for finding time. We understand that it's a weekday, it's a real working day, it's noon, and you finding time to join us to do this. It just shows that you recognize the importance of conversations like this, and the importance of advocacy when it comes to people living with neurodivergent conditions, autism in particular. And we are honored to have you on here. Thank you for your time more than anything. It's the Lend Your Voice. For those who are joining us for the first time, it's the Lend Your Voice 1000 Voices for Autism series, proudly brought to you by EK Foundation for Autism. On here, we use this as a medium to champion the voices for people living with autism in Nigeria and across Africa, advocating for them, sharing and bringing experienced people and sharing stories to the cause. We want to urge people to lend their voice for the cause and learn via joining this platform and learning one or two. Today's conversation is from policy to possibility. Autism inclusion and policy in action. So we have the amazing Dr. Uche Anyamele, who has started on fire with a little slight introduction, but want to give her a platform to tell us how the journey all started. How you mentioned you practice international law and thought all that, but how did it all start for you before transitioning into the health part of law? Let's take us on that journey as we kickstart this conversation, madam.
Thank you, Epic. So I should say that the first, the way I would put it is that, when I was doing my PhD, that was at Durham University. So Durham is top class for health and medical law. So even though I was doing my PhD in international trade and commercial law, I found myself, the law school in particular, Durham Law School is brilliant for medical law. I found myself having conversations on health and medical law. And the head of department at the time, Professor Derek, and brilliant Sean Patterson, they made sure that the faculty was just top notch. So our conversations as postgraduate students revolved a lot during lunch around health law, the dialectics of health law, philosophy of health law. And so I found I had an Iranian friend who was supervised by the professor I mentioned, so the head of department. And so we had that conversation all the time. We discussed abortion laws, we discussed euthanasia, we discussed right to life and the hierarchy. So it was a conversation that I thought about carefully, I engaged in. After that, I completed my PhD in international trade law. And then, I came back to Nigeria. When I got back to Nigeria, I started lecturing at Nile University. And whilst at Nile University, the professor, the head of faculty asked me to start lecturing medical law, to teach medical law. I'm going to be honest, at first, I balked at the idea. I was like, what am I doing in medical law, And I know that it can be a very emotive topic, it can be sensitive. But after certain considerations, I took on the module. So I took some time, about a month before the semester started, to really start reading up on health law. I looked at legal frameworks, international frameworks, national frameworks. And I think that was when I realized this is a very kind of important aspect of law. So many people would focus on the kind of business aspects of law or trade, something that is also, in that sense, I would say, geared towards economics of law, and policies of law. But medical law is different because you're dealing with human beings, you're dealing with rights of human beings. So as I read that and as I studied to teach students, I became kind of more, how do I put it, just more interested, more attuned to how important rights are, legal rights of individuals are. And in fact, from that lecturing, that year that I lectured medical law, I went on to publish an article in a South African journal on bioethics and law, and that journal, that topic was on religion and the intersection of medical law. When it comes to a minor, it was a big issue. And so from there, I started to take an interest in medical law. Whilst my practice is heavily international trade law, I have found that at every point in time, I keep my ears down when it comes to medical law, just to kind of see what is going on, to hear about euthanasia, to kind of see how laws affect certain people. So here we are today. I'm happy to lend my voice to this conversation. Thank you, Epic.
Brilliantly said. I think that's a very interesting start. I think I'm thrilled by how your career has consistently evolved. I'm a big fan of evolution, and you have had that consistently across your career. And I also applaud the courage to dare yourself to take on this, what might have seemed like new ventures at that time. Were you scared at any point? Was this just the thing of, were you scared of where it was going to at any point? Like, what was pushing you or driving you to make these decisions and try out these new facets of the legal practitioner?
What I have to tell you, I told you initially that I resisted the idea, Epic. I did. I sort of, I argued with the dean. I pushed back on it. I said, listen, this, I'm not trying to get emotional or get into something that, I'm not sure about. But the more I thought about it, when I first had a look, reluctantly, after a few days, I was like, okay, Uche, you just need to do this, I had a look at the module outline. And when I started to read the cases, I thought to myself, this is so important. It's not even something that, I think it's something that every lawyer should have an idea of, because it's just woven into the fabric of who we are as people in a society. Yes, you can, even though it is an area that, because it looks like is not so profitable for lawyers, but actually as a human being, you want to really focus on that aspect. I was a little bit, I was hesitant. I worried about it. it. At some point, when I was teaching medical law, I got a bit emotional, when I would read the cases, when I would read the arguments that patients would put forward, healthcare practitioners comparing cases in the US, in UK, and in Nigeria. So to that extent, but then you get to a point where you know that this is just the humane thing to do. This is what it should be done. When I was approached to lend my voice to this conversation, I thought it gave me the opportunity again to go back and sit down and reflect and think of my values as a person, as it relates to, medical law and what I want to fight for. And so I have to say that this conversation has triggered a lot for me in terms of reflecting. When I was thinking about the conversation, I thought to myself, oh, Uche, remember how much this gave you some sort of grounding, gave you a humanistic approach to life. And so to that extent, it's what I can say, that whilst I resisted the idea, I have found that it's an important aspect of any individual to learn to talk about, healthcare, health laws, how it affects people with disabilities, how it affects people that cannot speak up for themselves. Yes, thank you.
Well, absolutely beautiful. It's inspiring to live life, channeling your careers not just to courses that might seem as financially profitable, but recognizing that we also have to channel our careers to things that feel humane, things that amplify our sense of self, our purposes in life. And it's beautiful that you're doing that effortlessly across your career. We get a little bit into the conversation proper. Let's start by saying, what do you think is the state of health policies as it relates to autistic individuals here in Nigeria? Generally, you could do regularly. What's the state of health policies? As someone who has actively practiced in the medical law space here in Nigeria, what do you think is the state of health policies as regards the health of people, but particularly in this conversation, people living with autism?
Okay, so thank you. So I would say. So in the way I would really kind of put this is that, health policies as they relate to autism is something that is still developing in Nigeria, right? So when you really think about it, although there is increasing awareness, and advocacy, these are things that are happening. We have, some national policy frameworks, that just deal with disability. But one thing is that we know that we don't have any specific one that addresses autism in Nigeria. So is what is lacking really. So if you think about it, we know that there are just ongoing efforts. The degree of the effort, is what I think at some point in this conversation is something that, with the expertise that Ike Foundation has, is something that I would like to open up to those of us here and even the audience. But, there are ongoing efforts. The degree of the effort is what is to one really has to think about. So we have autism care. We have, sorry, just a second, please.
Okay, clear.
So sorry about that, please. I just had to yes. So what we're looking at is that there is advocacy going on, about improving kind of healthcare, promoting awareness, improving training for healthcare professionals, and I would say these are in terms of the policy space, these are things that are commendable, but a really important thing to think about is we need more advocacy in that aspect in terms of policies that relate to autism, in terms of having specific policies in that aspect, and effective interventions for persons on the with autism, in the Nigerian context. That's kind of my own. Just this is a broad response to say that okay, there is some effort, but the effort, I would say, is not to a high degree. And there, in terms of policies, there has to be specific policies. There has to be more done. There has to be, more advocacy, more conversations around this. Yeah.
On a scale of 1 to 10, right? Because you have made emphasis on the fact that these things need to be improved. There are that policies do exist, but it needs to be improved and improved upon. Right. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and with a reason to back your estimation, right? What would you say is the awareness of autism in Nigeria with regards around policymakers? Not let's not talk about ordinary Nigerians. The policymakers, is this a popular conversation around them, and why is it? Why do you think it's not? And what do you think can be done to ensure that it is a recurring conversation in the places that matter?
Okay, yes. So thank you. So I like the way you've put it, Epic. I like that. You've put it in the sense of, on a scale of 1 to 10. I think one of the challenges that one would, I think, generally find is there is a general lack of awareness. Okay, there is a general lack of awareness, and I would say data becomes really important in this aspect. But if you look at it from a place of how do I put it? Just kind of what one knows, something that is intuitive when you have conversations with people. I would say in terms of policies, in terms of what should be done as it relates to health law and policies in the autism space, I would rank it at, correct me if I'm wrong, but like I said, this is
anything. I think it's a personal opinion. There's no
yes,
but yes. So it's not. There's no right or wrong answer in this context. But I just wanted to get your brain into it. Yeah.
Thank you, Volker. Yes, so I'm going to say, because of the personal opinion, I'm going to say 4/10, because these conversations are not, yes, they're not, you can be having it with people, but there is really kind of no understanding within the policy circles. That there is a general lack of awareness. It's gradually increasing, but at a very kind of, I would say, a small pace. There are significant gaps, I would say. There are significant gaps in the public's understanding, broadly speaking, about healthcare access and inclusive policies, things like that. And as I said, even though there is a growing awareness, what we know is that there has to be some sort of consistency, Epic, in terms of the push for these health laws and policies that affect autism. There are still stigmas and misconceptions rooted in, cultural beliefs that sometimes people don't even want to talk about kind of people with disability, because they don't understand it. I'm going to say what you would find yesterday, as I was kind of thinking about this topic. I spoke to somebody and I said to the person, what do you know? A 25-year-old, young man, and I said to him, what do you know about autism? And he looked at me clueless. So whenever I want to have a conversation, I kind of try to gauge the kind of understanding or awareness with people around me, and then take it further. But he was like, yeah, I don't know anything about it. But what you find is that is a reflection of the average Nigerian that has not, that does not have any relative that is autistic. So when you think about that and you take it further to the policy circles, you would find out that even those that have children or relatives that have been diagnosed with autism, they are reticent or reluctant to speak about it. And so in that sense, I would say the awareness level would have to be low. If you look at it from a logical perspective, the awareness level is low. If you look at it from a practical perspective, the fact that nothing has been done in a concrete sense, that's my kind of conclusion on this. That the awareness level, I would say about 4/10, 5/10 among policy circles. But there is a push by the civil society. Yeah. Thank you.
Well said. Well said. I like how you have you've owned this opinion, and you have done proper justice to it, because you said some things which was going to prompt my next question, right? Because I wanted to get a little bit of what you think, right? Because you've addressed awareness as a particular challenge people living with autism, especially here in Nigeria, face. You also mentioned lack of consistency, right? So I'd say that you've given me two already. Are there any other particular primary challenges you think people living with disability, but this case particularly autism in Nigeria, experience consistently?
Sorry, Epi, can you repeat that again? I tried to listen.
What would you say? Like, you've addressed lack of awareness and in some cases lack of consistency with following through. But would you also say that there are more health challenges that people living with autism experience here in Nigeria?
So yes, thank you. Yes, I really I really think that that's a big thing, Epic. So in terms of health challenges that autistic people face in Nigeria or people living with autism, I would say that there is a problem with diagnosis, isn't it? That's the main thing in terms of autism. So people, if a person has autism, a child, they can be misdiagnosed or not even diagnosed at all. And I'm going to, I'm going to say that there are many factors for this. There are many factors for this. Nigeria is a spiritual nation, okay? It's a spiritual nation. So, and I'm a Christian and I'm religious and heavily so, to be honest. But there has to be an understanding that healthcare is an important part, in terms of the health challenges that persons with disability face is an important aspect. Being able to diagnose the problem is an important aspect, of solving that particular problem or managing that particular situation. So I would say, yes, there is the aspect of diagnosis, wrong diagnosis, misdiagnosis. You can also think about the fact that there is no primary caregivers or health professionals are not well trained in that aspect. So that's a big issue. There is inadequate, or I would say insufficient training of persons that are supposed to help manage this kind of disability or help. There's also, a lot of, for in the community, there is, again, just sometimes a lack of understanding, in terms of what persons with autism would struggle with and how to provide the solution that they need. So I would say, in that health, around that health axis, these are some of the things that I would say, affect, in terms of health, affect people with autism.
Also, I think for us as a foundation, I think a lot of these problems are things that we experience on a daily when people come to us, and we try our possible best to pride in the fact that we're confident in the skilled hands that we provide and all that, and we are rendering therapeutic services to people living with autism across the board. But this is when you discuss with people generally who have experiences across different cities here in Nigeria, it's something common they see, misdiagnosis and all that. And I like how you have brought that to the forefront of this conversation too. Still on Nigeria and the policy framework. Nigeria is a signatory to the Convention on the Rights of Persons Living with Disabilities, CPRD. CRPD rather. Nigeria is a signatory to that document by the UN. Before we go into the details of how well Nigeria is, what would you rate execution, the role that we are playing as a nation with regards to that? Let's get a little bit of the idea behind that document by the UN. Talk us through that, the UN's Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities.
Yes, so thank you. So there's no way that you talk about I think disability without talking about the UN CRPD as you've called it, but it's a legally binding international human rights treaty. It gives equality. It aims to provide equality and equal enjoyment for persons with disability and fundamental freedoms for them as well. I think in terms of the purposes of that convention, it was adopted by or just kind of giving a background for those who don't know. Sometimes you can't really assume this thing. So it was adopted by the UN General Assembly in 2006, I would say 2006, and then it entered into force in 2008. In terms of its impact and import, it's the first legally binding international human rights treaty to specifically address the rights of persons with disability. And it has some sort of key principles that, when you start to look at national laws, you would see that those principles are also enshrined in national laws. So, for example, we can talk about things like non-discrimination. We can talk about dignity and value of the person. We can talk about accessibility. These are inclusion. These are things that are, very important. Equality and opportunity. These are things that are very important when you're talking about a framework. So this framework, the point of this UN framework is that states, have to adopt it, and then it should be operationalized. When it's adopted, it should be operationalized. So it must be domesticated for it to have an effect. So that's kind of a broad perspective on that. On that UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Yeah.
Now, bringing it down here, how well would you say is the commitment, Nigeria's commitment as a nation to this document? How well would you say it's reflected in our domestic policies here?
Thank you for that. So Nigeria, I think currently, Nigeria has.
I feel like I'm putting you on the spot a lot with trying to get your opinions on how.
No, no, not at all. Because there's no way that when you're talking about laws and things like that, there's no way that you won't come across this, and there's no way that we cannot have that discussion in the context of Nigeria. Then I don't know what the point of the discussion would be. So please, you don't have to apologize. And I think it's a good question. I think that for anybody that watches the recording or anybody, this is something they would kind of like to know, how far is Nigeria aligned with that. So in terms of that, so Nigeria signed the UN CPRD, and I think in 2007, but then I think in 2010 that's when it was ratified. But we kind of need a national law to really operationalize the CRPD's provision. The Disability Act aligns, and I'm going to talk about that maybe as we move forward, just the alignment of the Nigeria's Disability Act with the CPRD. So in terms of that, we know that Nigeria has ratified it, but Nigeria has not met its, the way I put it is that Nigeria has not met its reporting obligations. Okay, it's not really meeting with it, and that feeds into what you mentioned at some point, Epic. When you were kind of saying what is Nigeria doing? What is level of kind of awareness about disability? What do people know? How are people handling it, even in the policy circle? So something that is very important is the reporting obligations, but Nigeria isn't really meeting that, and so that's a big problem. So in Nigeria, the CRPD has not been fully operationalized, or incorporated into Nigerian law. There is some alignment, but not fully. And then there is the lack of implementation and, as I mentioned, reporting, which hinders what we know is the full realization of the rights of persons with disabilities. So if a country is struggling with implementation challenges, what you would find is that you can come to a kind of a fairly safe conclusion that that particular law does not have the effect it should have, and is not having the impact it should have on persons with disability. So what we have, and I mentioned that we have the Discrimination Against Persons with Disabilities Act. So we have that. And it came in 2018 and aims to address some of the issues that the UNCRPD addresses. So there's alignment, as I said, with criminalization of discrimination and things like that. There is ongoing efforts, EPIC, there's ongoing effort on kind of making sure that, or ensuring that the provisions of the UNCRPD is being kind of implemented. But the question really, and I think I leave this open to our guests and audience, is how much is being done and what is the impact of what is being done in terms of alignment. So I'll say that Nigeria is, then let me give an example now. So you can write an exam, right? And if you write an exam, you can get 20 over 100, you can get 40, you can get 15, you can get 50, you can get 70, and you can get 80. So what is important when we are looking at this is the degree to which Nigeria is doing what they are doing. And the key word for me, the critical word is the degree. So that is a problem. If you have a law that has some alignment with the provisions of the UNCRPD, but actually key aspects of the law is not being implemented, it's not being talked about, there are a lot of lags. It means that you haven't done enough to say that you have an alignment, or that you're doing well in this aspect, especially when we compare or consider it with what other countries in the global north, what they are doing with their disability laws. So that would kind of be my response on this.
Well said, madam. Well said, madam. Would you say that there, or what would you consider to be systemic barriers that have been put in place preventing the effective implementation of this act? Because it's on the policy level thing now. So, do you think there are barriers, like on the level of the policymakers, that prompts the halting of the effective implementation of this supposed policies?
So in terms of when you talk about systemic barriers in Nigeria, I would take a second and think about that. Yes, I would say that there are barriers. So the first thing, and this is something that I said initially, is awareness. Just that lack of awareness. It's a systemic issue, both at the community level, and then when you think about stakeholders in policy space, or just people, there is that there's that broad lack of awareness that that's a first barrier that you have to cross before you even begin to talk about anything at all, before you begin to talk about anything. Then there's also, I would say, Epic, there are funding issues. But when you talk about funding, it would be an interesting.
It's a very sensitive topic when we get into funding.
Yes, I would imagine it is, simply because people would allocate funding to what they deem is priority. So if you're allocating funding to something that does not necessarily have human rights value, and you're allocating funding to something that is more kind of economic in value, like I said, you're right that it's an independent discussion on its own. So I would say funding issues. Let me keep it broad and say kind of, we can talk about, funding issues. Yes, so there's that, awareness, there's funding issues. Then, I would say also lack of, I don't know if this lack of kind of expertise or resources in that aspect, as it comes to people, trained personnel or professionals that have knowledge or expertise in this area. Without that, what are you really going to do? If you're in a country where people don't have so much expertise, people are not willing to pursue it because they don't think that is the margins of profits are high, then you'd struggle to implement that law, and that has to do with also so lack of understanding has to do with a bit of lack of expertise, I would say that, and then political will, lack of political will is an issue, isn't it? So there's no push for it. You'd be amazed at what people are pushing for, and I'm going to say this carefully because, Epic, there is an argument think about this carefully. There's an argument that when you empower people, like economics rights should come first. There's a strong argument for that, okay? That there should be an economic push in rather than human rights first. I tell you, it's a big argument. It's an argument that I've known for all the times I've done research. When you're talking of, because I had looked at the adoption of the UN Convention in Nigeria, but this is on trade and commercial law. And one of the arguments, that people would put is that, for example, Nigeria has more pressing things to deal with, like human rights issues. They want to do that. But some research, and I'm talking of solid research, shows that is more sensible to empower people economically and to push laws that advocate, economic empowerment before you come to human rights. Yeah. So if this is the thinking, then on this particular point, I haven't really explored that thought too much. Sometimes I think it's important. Sometimes I think no, but if there is violation of human rights, how can you even have the mental ability to proceed? But let me give you an example. Epic, and to the audience, let me give an example. If I'm hungry, if I'm hungry and I can't really eat, I cannot provide for my children. And and perhaps on the other hand, I'm facing something like, I would use police brutality. I know that when I go out, police is doing this sort of thing. I'm not going to answer that question. I'm going to leave it to the brilliant people that would listen to this recording, and to you, Epic. I'd like to hear your take on it. In that scenario, what is going to be priority to you in terms of hierarchy? What is going to be priority to you? So that you understand what the debate is about. Why sometimes people think that, all this fight for human rights, sometimes, people with disability, they are the minority, the people have to eat. People generally have to eat first, although, you have to think about protecting minority rights. So, one thing, and I'm not putting you on the spot, I just like to hear your thinking on it. You don't have to give a yes or no answer. And I'd like people to think about it, when they, so I like to just kind of,
I think I would say it's a very, very interesting argument, right? There's something that we say when it comes to as a foundation that caters for people living with autism. We understand that in this context, the primary for us, we provide early intervention services to children, right? But one thing we try to do is we say that when we talk to parents and caregivers of these children, we try to remind the parents of the importance of taking care of themselves first, because we understand that you can only give care to a child when you are well taken care of, right? Now, to bring this in the context of the conversation we should address, the importance of economic empowerment, if, as you said, a person's human rights is violated and there are significant lapses in how they exist in the space and community, how can they now function effectively to execute economically empowering activities if probably the mind is not, or the health is being trampled upon? But as you said, it's a very interesting conversation. I think it's an entire discussion in its own that we could have a whole argument about that. And in fact, I'll open the floor to everybody listening live. If you have an opinion about that, or if you have questions for Dr. Uche, please do well to drop in the comment section. We'll save them at the end of the conversation and we'll throw them at her if you want her to explain and extrapolate more on some of the things that she has said. please share the comments, share the questions. We'll push it to her towards the end of the conversation. I think it has been a very, very interesting conversation so far. And our last question spoke about barriers, and we've spoken about a lot about some ways where we think that the policies that support people at it in their finest capacity. I think one thing we I want us to address next, or go a little bit of go a little bit into, is the importance of monitoring. Right? We one reason that if we all agree, as you have said, that Nigeria is not exhibiting or fulfilling the pact as effectively as it should, what would you say are ways that or systems that can be put in place to ensure that we are being monitored adequately to fulfill the obligation that we have committed to, right? If there are existing references that we can draw from global practices or countries outside, please do well to reference it in conversation. But how can we monitor? How can we monitor this is like and report? You spoke a little bit about reporting, but how can we ensure that we monitor our own performance as a nation in this space and ensure that we are delivering as effectively as we should? And please feel free to give global references of monitoring if you have any.
So thank you very much. Yes. So, in terms of in Nigeria, I would say the kind of main mechanisms for monitoring compliance with disability, when you're thinking of disability inclusive policies, is, we have the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities that was established in 2020. So that's it. That I would say the acronym is NCPWD. NCPWD, is responsible for coordinating and monitoring the implementation of the Disability Act that we have. And we know that act, aims to kind of prohibit discrimination, protect the rights of persons with disabilities. And that commission, the commission we're talking about now, they develop and promote the monitoring or disability related regulations. That's kind of what they do. So they also have the role of collaborating with government agencies. We have something called in Nigeria, we have something called the Joint National Association of Persons with Disabilities. So it's an umbrella organization for advocating and monitoring the rights of persons with disabilities. So if you look at the mandate of the NCPWD, I'll put it again, I'll call it for National Commission for Persons with Disabilities. They are established to oversee, when you're thinking about it, the implementation of the Disabilities Rights Act and ensure that persons with disability are policies for persons with disability are effectively put into practice. If you also look at their function, they develop regulations, standards, policies that relate to disabilities, and I've mentioned that they collaborate with government agencies. So they monitor the implementation of policies across different sectors. So that's their responsibility. So that's one way. But there are challenges that NCPWD has, and we can think about it. Their challenges include there's some perceptions of confusion and competition within the disability-focused CSOs, and I know that this is an area that AK Foundation would be able to talk about your lived or experiences in terms of competition. Then we also have, in terms of ways to monitor it, the Act itself, is a way. So the key provisions of the Act, which I mentioned earlier when we were talking, it prohibits discrimination. Then there's you have to think about giving people discrimination against persons with disabilities, giving people rights, inclusion, all of those things. So you can benchmark or you can check through NCPWD. You can benchmark or check how much how much is being accomplished, how much is being done, in terms of monitoring. Then there's also, if you think about that Act, that 2018 Act, there's also an enforcement provision. The Act establishes complaints mechanisms. So that's one way for individuals that experience discrimination, allowing them to report violations and to seek some sort of redress. And I'm going to talk about the National Association, of Persons with Disabilities, that joint National Association. They have a responsibility to monitor as well. They have a responsibility for advocacy. So these are ways that you can do some form of monitoring. And I'll come to there's something that I'm going to come to what happens internationally in a second. In terms of other monitoring mechanisms, you can, because Nigeria is a signatory to that convention, the UN convention, the CPRD, we know that that's one way, and they are required to report periodically to the UN. But I mentioned earlier that this is an area that Nigeria is lagging behind. So it's something that needs to be improved upon. Then we have civil society organizations. For me, I read some reviews, on Ike Foundation online, and in terms of providing that primary care for persons with autism, I do know that Ike Foundation is doing a fantastic job. What would be also kind of what would be useful, I think, for people in this space is to know the extent to which Ike Foundation is doing any form of reporting, if there are any ways that is going on. Then, we can have stakeholder engagement. That's one way. You can have international development partners. You can have, including people like the FCDO, in summary, I would say that a very strong way, is the NCPWD. They are the primary monitoring body, but then we have civil society organizations. But it takes a multifaceted approach involving civil society, international organizations, the legal framework, all of those things that in ensuring that disability inclusive policies are effectively implemented and monitored in Nigeria. One of the things as I was thinking about it, one of the things I came across that is being done internationally is I know that in some countries, there's was it human rights, something on Human Rights Watch I was looking at, and yes, they mentioned kind of the importance of collective action by so that civil society organizations are not victimized or sort of shut down. There has to be collective coming together to advocate or to report so that there won't be so much consequences. So there's that coming together as I don't know, as a group. Then you can do reporting. You can report your findings to a wider audience. They do that. Human Rights Watch, advocated that this is one way that you can sort of monitor or make sure government is held accountable. You can monitor government performance by writing briefs. When you have findings, you write briefs and you publish them. So these are some of the things I know that happen internationally and can happen locally as well. Yeah.
I think one thing I noticed with a lot of what you have said is the fact that Nigeria is literally playing, not, and I don't mean this in a negative way, right? But Nigeria is literally playing catch up when it comes to catering to people living with disabilities.
Yes.
To think that the Disability Act was, yes, please, because I think the Disability Act was just signed in 2019, the NCPWD, as you mentioned, 2020. We're playing catch up. Can you hear me, madam?
Okay, yeah, I think I stopped. You were saying that we're playing catch up. Yes, so that's where I stopped. Yes, but I didn't hear anything else after that.
Oh, yes. I think, yes, I was saying that. So we're playing catch up, and it just feels like there's still so much work to do going forward. And this is why we advocate for conversation mechanisms for people living with autism who feel that their rights have been trampled upon to go to seek some form of requisition.
Sorry, so there was a break in transmission. So you were cut off at some point. So I didn't get. Yeah.
My bad. I think the network over
It's
here
the
is
network, yes.
it's raining here. So yeah. So I was
Ah,
asking. So we agree that Nigeria is kind of playing catch up, trying to meet up and all that. I wanted to ask if there are existing institutional mechanisms or legal remedies for people living with autism to run to if they feel like their rights in some way have been trampled upon. Is the NCPWD, are they receptive to advocating for people who feel like people living with disabilities who feel like they have been unjustly interacted with, basically?
okay. So, yes, thank you. So, what we're talking about now is in terms of institutional mechanisms. Yes, I would say there are. So, um, let me, before I go into kind of the regular answer that one would expect from this, there is a one of the let me know your opinion on this, but one of the mechanisms I would say, everybody knows the Human Rights Radio, right? So as I thought about disability in Nigeria, human rights violation, that was one of the first things that came to mind, the Human Rights Radio. So you can, when your where you are in Nigeria matters financially, okay? In terms of being able to address certain things, where you are financially, how comfortable you are, the resources you have, how wealthy your family or brother family, how else they are. It matters a lot, Epic. But I would say that in terms of so this is informal. So I don't know if it's informal, but they are well heard because they do two things. So Human Rights Radio, right? They do two things. One, there is advocacy, and then there's the media aspect, and then there is the fact that they actually call out those things. So I would say if you're thinking of just kind of, if you don't have much resources, although I've been there a couple of times, or I passed there, and I've been around there. There's usually a crowd, and people from lower income go there to make their case heard. So if there are issues, that's I would just say as a very practical point, as a very, just because Nigeria, we are about 200 million, okay, and know that many people are living below the poverty line. That's a way to get your cause heard, or to have a remedy. But I would say then, yes, there are legal remedies and institutional remedies. Apart from this very practical thing that I've given, some people might find it. The reason I mentioned it first is that mentally it can be stressful to navigate. It can be stressful to navigate going to seek legal remedy if you have a disability. It can be stressful. So you want to start with something that is just easy and practical, or something you can go to and they speak your language. Then we now come to, okay, so the things that we know. I would say as a lawyer, what people that are perhaps in the upper echelons want to hear, or people in civil society know that this is what you can do. But Epic, I should say, translating it into practical, this thing is a very important. So I won't just read it off. I'm going to say it's important that when you know these things, there has to be a bridge between this kind of high legal remedies or institutional remedies and people that
What
are
is practical?
seeking it.
Yeah, what is
Yeah.
obtainable?
Yes, in practice. Yes. So I would say yes. The first thing is that you have that we have the Disabilities Rights Act, is a key piece of legislation for anybody to protect people's rights, and additionally we have the Child's Rights Act, that's important, because children are usually is in childhood that people are diagnosed with autism, isn't it? Yes, so that's kind of important. It provides specific protections for children with disabilities, including those on the autism spectrum. Then we've talked about that legal framework, discrimination against persons with disabilities. That one, that's we've been talking about that. That's very important. We've talked about the NCPWD, that they have the mandate to promote and protect the rights of persons with disabilities. Then the 1999 Constitution is important. It is one way that, I should mention that I worked with a judge in the Federal High Court as a research assistant, and Federal High Court is where you have a lot of human rights violation issues. So a significant part of the research I did was fundamental human rights. And those cases, believe it or not, I know that many people may not know this. If you can get a lawyer to bring that, is something because it's not money related. Judges take it seriously. If they find, it's one way that they feel that they can do justice for people. So every time that we're doing that research, for the judge I worked with, we looked at it objectively. There was no politics involved. Has this person's rights been violated? And we will give the order immediately. So it's something that I think that most people don't know, that you can come under the Constitution. You just find a lawyer that won't charge much and just say, oh, this is on a basic level, this is a violation of my right. Then, we have also the international conventions like the UNCRPD, which we can think about, it mandates the inclusion and protection of persons with disability. Then, you can have, there are legal aid schemes in Nigeria, although, again, corruption is something to think about. While those schemes exist, do they really go to the people that are meant to benefit or utilize those schemes? One can think about things like, as I talk institutional, I've talked about the Joint National Association of Persons with Disability. That one has a long acronym, so I would leave the acronym. And then I've talked about NCPWD, the National Commission for Persons with Disabilities. Then civil society organizations. See, they are such an important part because they are people that can hold your hand and walk you through, any kind of rights violation that a person has. So that's I think that's so to really, I don't know, Epic, to really kind of answer your question or talk about this, in the Nigerian context, one has to think about the financial ability of persons with disabilities and practical ways to meet their remedies. Yes. Thank you.
That was beautifully said. I love how you have, in fact, you have stated significantly with references, very obtainable and practical places people can go to if they feel like they have been, in one way or the other, met the wrong side of justice. It's reassuring to note that we have judges in Nigeria who are very passionate about cases, like you mentioned, cases that have no financial implications. It's reassuring to know that. It's reassuring to know that our judges are looking to follow those cases through and ensure that the rights of people living with disabilities and any kind of human rights violations are not infringed upon. In your opinion, I want to get your personal opinion.
Yeah, I think I missed that, Epic, just because the network stalled a bit, so I didn't.
But can you hear me now, madam? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
I think.
Yes. Yes.
Madam, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, although it's breaking off a little bit.
Okay, I'll take it again. I was saying that I wanted to get your personal opinion on this. That what do you think is the what policy or innovation do you think can happen in Nigeria that can make the biggest impact in the lives of persons living with autism here in Nigeria? Like a policy that can be implemented immediately, or an innovation that could like significantly change things and make impacts in the lives of persons living with autism.
Yes. So thank you. This is, this I think that because IK Foundation is dealing with, this is your core focus. I think that this is such an important. This question is really the thrust of this conversation. What should be done in terms of policy and innovation? I mean, so I would say that if you want to improve, the lives of persons living with autism, in Nigeria, when you're thinking about policy changes and innovation, it should focus on early diagnosis. Okay, it should. That's a very because I saw something on Instagram, and a man, he should be in his late 30s. He was saying that he just got diagnosed with autism, that he's on the spectrum, and he'd had like such a difficult life. And I wondered to myself, so how was he managing all this while? So maybe he may have been mild on the spectrum, was he autism or ADHD? But you find that if there's a lot of confusion. And this is one of the saddest things, to find that you've struggled through life and you don't have a diagnosis, and people would have termed you maybe difficult, unruly, or yes. So I would say early diagnosis is so important. And because we are a Christian nation, it's important not to remove that aspect from any conversation. Nigeria is deeply Christian, deeply spiritual. Whether or not we are, our values are in alignment is nothing entirely. But even if one thinks that you believe that, and I believe that prayer solves a lot of things. I've seen prayer work. I've seen prayer heal. What I would say is that the important government is there for a particular purpose. Even as a Christian, government is important. Having excellent healthcare is important, because getting that diagnosis lets you even know what you're praying about. Okay, it lets you know, and it is, in the final analysis, it is God who created, and people who are able to decipher, this. So I would say innovations should focus on that. Then access to quality education and therapy, and this is something that IKE Foundation can speak about, the extent to which civil society organizations and foundations, are supported by government to ensure that there's access to quality education and therapy. Because it's one thing to have access, it's another thing for it to have to be quality, to be quality, and yes. Then there should be increased awareness all the time. When you talk about something, frequently, people get to understand that, yes, this is an issue. This is the way to solve it. This is the way to deal with it. So I would say that, there has to be, somebody says, Ibrahim, fantastic. There should be free diagnosis, treatment, and intervention. I completely agree with you, especially because, the number of people with autism in Nigeria compared to the population is not so much. It's something that we can easily assimilate in our budget. So yes, good point. Really, really, really thank you for that point. That's such a good point, So you want to, and when you're thinking about enhanced early diagnosis and intervention, you want to think about integration of ASD screening into routine child health checks. That's something that should be done you should just do it, and then, qualified personnel is important. So there should be increased access to qualified personnel. And I've talked about, in the education, I've talked about awareness, but in the education sector, I think one thing I would generally say is implement inclusive education policies. There should be specialized training for teachers, and provision of assistive technology. Everybody can't just be working in the bank or being a lawyer, we now need to start training professionals in specific disabilities to gain that level of expertise. That's the only way, and people that can innovate, like bring technology that would help, deal with certain issues in this regard. So yes, I would say that then social inclusion and support is also important, access to vocational training and employment opportunities. Where I used to work as a senior research fellow, I know that recently, so somebody was employed with a disability, and I'm talking of kind of a disability that was kind of obvious. So I wasn't there to kind of see how the person was the tracks or progress that the person was making, but it's something that I'm curious to know how Nigeria approaches it, and the person was just kind of treated as normal, but I questioned whether they needed extra support in that regard. So yes, these are my thoughts on it, Epic. Sorry.
No need to apologize, but this is very, very solid point. I think as a foundation, one thing that when interacting with people, interacting with caregivers, parents, I think is a consistent, I don't want to say complaint, but concern of the cost for providing early intervention, therapy, assessment, and all that amongst people, especially as you said, we've addressed earlier in this conversation how we live in a very low income country. Would you say there are existing avenues for provided by the government in this context now to subsidize these programs for people living with disability? Are there any that exist that you might be aware of, or you might want to share on this platform for people to know? Mom, I think your mic is muted.
Sorry, thank you. So this has to do a lot with practice, and I would say that I should be more involved in the practical aspects of this. What I know is I wouldn't want to say something that is vague in my mind. I wouldn't want to say something and then somebody will go and say, oh, but this thing is not even functioning. Maybe just because I heard it distinctly. On this particular question, I would kind of my reaching out to you and the audience and people that are in practice, in real practice, people that do day to day, that have gone to hospitals and know what is going on. And I haven't necessarily had a chance to go to the hospital to kind of know what is going on in that aspect. But if I can throw this question, because I'm happy to learn, and on my LinkedIn, I was clear about that whilst I have, expertise in law and legal frameworks, practice is something that I'm always keen to know what is happening. So if anybody can let us know what they've come across, what the Nigerian government is doing, that would really be helpful.
Well said, madam. I would say that we let's. I want us to take the conversation because I'm looking at my clock now. We're 1 hour to the conversation, and we still have a few questions. So I want us to see how we can run through, touch some elements of the conversation, which is also very important. But we'll definitely we'll hold your thought on that. We've spoken a lot about policies, which is the entire context of this conversation. But as a society, right? How can we do better as a society, ensuring that our workspaces, our schools, our churches, because you said we're a very spiritual country, our churches, our mosques, how can we ensure that what are things that we can implement as a society beyond policies now to ensure that these places are receptive for people living with autism? These places are comfortable, convenient for people living with autism. People living with autism can thrive in these spaces without any form of discrimination and all that. What can we do better as a society to continue to build habitable spaces for people living with autism?
Yeah. Okay. So did you know? I'm going to start with a story. I'm going to start with a story.
I love that.
Then we will go into it. I have a friend whose first son has autism. He's on the autism spectrum. And she went to church, and as she got to church, her son, started to, just get agitated. He was shouting loudly. It was an episode. Yes, it was an episode. And, she said to me, Uche, I tried to signal, the pastor, to pray for him, because she felt so embarrassed, even though she's been living with her son for about 6 or 7 years. But she said that episode was particularly bad. She was so embarrassed. People were looking at her, and the pastor sort of just looked at her and went. Now, there are things I understand about certain things, so I'm not even judging anything. But I use that scenario when you pose this question. The thing I thought to myself was, as the child started to show the tantrum, as that started to happen, in that space where Nigerians are very religious, in that sort of space where that people come to church every Sunday, and some even weekday services are fully packed. What should have been done for that woman? What should have been there to help that woman? One thing, practically speaking, there should be like sort of safe spaces to take the child to, so that they are not kind of stuck in the congregation where everybody's kind of distracted. But because there was I think what they were trying to do is get the child's hand to come down, try to take the child outside, and things like that. But that's, when that somebody, when you want to make provision or accommodation for people that have autism, when they come into your church, they should be able to speak to somebody who understands disabilities. At least church is such a big part of Nigeria's culture. So a few people should be trained in that aspect. You speak to that person and they identify the type of disability, and then that provision would be made. So for a child or an individual with autism, is having a space where, and I'm speaking very practically, what I'd like to see, not is just have a space or a room that is comfortable, that is not too sensory. I don't know how to put it now. That
we like to call them sensory rooms, but I totally understand.
Yes. And then if you want them to engage in the service, they can be, kind of technology adapted to that effect. So it's people that are kind of informed or well trained about it. There should also be like, at least in churches that really a big place with a lot of people, trained professionals would be important in this. So apart from people who have just awareness or knowledge, trained professionals, having one or two in the congregation, because it's not, many people don't even bring, their family members with disabilities to church. So when people do, it should be well accommodated. So that's kind of that. When you then think about workspaces, so this is just when you think about workspaces, if you have HR, if you have people in HR, or if you have, there should be embedded in HR policy, not only HR policy, but in how do I put it now? In the structure of every small organization, whether one-man organization or something like that, or civil society or research organizations, whatever it is that you have, the HR should make accommodation for persons with disability. Again, in terms of facility, so physical facility, in terms of where, small spaces that is designed to accommodate them. And there should be training and awareness, Epic, on that, so that staff know how to deal with persons that have autism. There should be employment opportunities for them. So, if you look at what is happening internationally, I know, organizations that employ people with autism. I know many organizations, and they are thriving. I know people that make space, hotels that accommodate persons with autism, and they pay them, and their own the work that they do is specialized and designed to to fit into the broader picture of the workplace. So these are things that I would say it's important. You can't just leave people at home or leave them and say, oh, you have a disability, therefore you cannot fit into the society, because they have skills that are useful to the to the society at large. So it's making sure that those skills are accommodated and accounted for in workplaces, and that people are aware of it, so that people can develop spaces that can accommodate persons with disabilities. So I would say kind of practically, again, there are more things to think about, there are more things to think about, but this is just kind of in the interest of time. These are some of my thoughts.
Well, absolutely well said. You have, I think, I like how you started with a story, because that's why we host conversations of this magnitude, because over here we want, which I would get your opinion on, because we like to understand the whole idea of lend your voices for opportunities for people to share lived experiences, very particular to us. And I would like to get your opinion on that. How important do you think lived experiences and storytelling is in influencing public perception and drive policy change?
Yeah. You, I mean, thank you so much, Epic, for that question. When I was preparing for this talk, my worry was that, oh, Uche, you're just, it's a lot of kind of review of laws. Again, I'm a lawyer, so you
So it's
do what
expected.
comes, and yeah, you do what comes naturally to you. Yes, but when we tell law, and I mentioned this initially, that when I was lecturing, when I read the cases, when I saw the arguments, when there's something health law does to you. You become like that human side of you, that empathetic side of you, that compassionate side of you is really triggered when you read cases that you know that this could have gone better. How did this person end up here? Because there were no laws to kind of cover that person. So this is where, and as a lawyer, cases tell a story. Okay, so when you read those cases, in fact, is what drove me to write that article that I published in Journal of Bioethics and Law, because I read that case and I thought to myself, how can a parent do this to a minor? I'm a religious person, but how do you stop your child from taking blood because of your beliefs? But I like how the Nigerian court held it. So it's reading that story that gave life to the laws that I was, reviewing and teaching. So I think stories are so important. When you hear a person's story, you can match the story to the gap in policy or law, and you can say, this person had such a harrowing experience. I will advocate and make sure that the laws meet, they are able to meet this need so that another person does not go through this. I think storytelling is really just critical, is vital, is important. It cannot be done away with unless everything we're dealing with becomes abstract. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, then can you enact a law on this? Can you, with people with disability? But when somebody comes to you and says, I took my child, to my workplace, and there was nothing to assist my child with a disability. And then the person it tells you, and you can see the range of emotions that the person is going through when they are talking about it. I think it spurs action a bit more. I think it gives people the kind of the drive to say, I'm going to do something about this. I must, in my own little space as a lawyer, I'm going to write about it. I'm going to send documents or policy briefs to people in government and say we need a policy that discrimination is wrong. And to be very kind of honest with you, when I was preparing for this talk, I began to think to myself that, Uche, you focused so much on trade law and policy in the last few years, but this is something that I really want to now do a bit more, I'm so glad for this conversation. Start to write, thoughts and opinion and strong, well-researched pieces on, medical law, incidences of what happens to people and how it can be addressed legally. So, thank you for that question, Epic. I think that stories are so important, and I think that people should come up with their own lived experiences so that other people that don't have an idea can hear and know how to advocate or press for, policies that can help persons with disability live more comfortably and be assimilated into the society. I hope I didn't talk too much. Sorry.
No, not at all. Not at all. Very, very, very impactful opinions. We recognize that storytelling. We believe personally the importance of storytelling and how it humanizes the entire conversation. There's something you said. If they are not real life stories and lived experiences, everything feels abstract. And we like when we draw references to that. And we love how you have said that. We'll be wrapping up the conversation in a bit. We've been on here for quite some time. It has been a very, very thoroughly educating and insightful conversation. I don't want us to leave without talking about something that is very common in today's world: technology and data. How can technology and data play a role in improving the lives of people, or improving the health service in Nigeria and the life of people living with autism in Nigeria? You'd referenced a couple of times assistive technologies here and there. Just let's talk about it in detail: technology and the use of data. How can we maximize it to ensure that we are channeling it towards improving the lives of people living with autism in Nigeria and health service in Nigerian society at large?
So thank you. Yes. So that technology is technology, data, big data, all of those things. Is you can't do away with it again. So this question, it just has to be, it has to be addressed. It has to be thought about properly. It has to be is one of the ways that one can make lives for persons living with autism easier. There's technology like AI. So a big part of my research is AI policy, just AI governance. But in the first place, what I would kind of say, if you're thinking about the in recent years, we have that there has been intersection of technology and healthcare that has paved the way, for groundbreaking advancements. Healthcare is a big thing, even in AI, and technology in healthcare is such a big thing. So it can aid children. Technology can aid children with autism, because autism is a complex neurodevelopmental condition, right? So there are challenges in communication, social interaction, and behavior. If you integrate innovative technologies, into the kind of the lives of persons that live with autism, you will see transformative changes in the diagnosis. What I would say, for example, is in diagnosis. So technology can play a role, in being able to diagnose persons with disability. Then even in therapy, that's kind of important, and it will improve the overall quality of the life of children or persons that are living with autism. So in terms of diagnosis advancement, I would say because early diagnosis impacts the trajectory of autism, intervention and support, we can have early detection. If you have technology that can detect autism early, if you even by a slight, but it makes a difference at the point how quickly you're able to detect this thing, that this child has autism, or this child has a neurodevelopmental condition. So you can use algorithms, are particularly important in this context. Sorry, I think I muted. I think I muted myself for a second. So you can have sophisticated technological screening tools. You can use algorithms to detect, what this is, this is a pattern, and this pattern is showing up, and this is, we can use the algorithm to say with a high level of accuracy that this is this condition, or this is the situation, or this is what is happening. This child is on this band of the spectrum. I don't know, I don't know how it's put.
Yes, the range and spectrum. Yeah, but you're correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you can also use it. You can detect behavioral patterns that are indicative of autism spectrum disorder. So it will allow for timely intervention. So many people are advancing in technology, even in Africa. But in that way, when you have those algorithms that can detect that early, you know that this person does not have to go through, and their family members, they don't have to go through that kind of limbo period, or that vague thing of what is going on with our child, what is this happening. Then we have advanced imaging techniques. We have advanced imaging techniques that it can kind of give insights into the brain, what is happening in the brain, the way the brain is functioning. It can aid also in early identification and personalized treatment for children, with autism. So it enables tailored access to crucial autism services for children. I say then you can use technology for therapeutic interventions. Okay, so we know that you can use augmented reality and virtual reality platforms to simulate real life scenarios. So it can provide a safe environment for social skill practice. And that's something that persons with autism would appreciate, that simulation of real life situations, so that they're not they're definitely not caught off guard. And so that I think that's something that is very important, that if you have that sort of immersive experience, what it helps you do as somebody, or somebody that has that disability, is to be able to how do I phrase it now, for the child to kind of learn and would I say generalized social cues, just understand that these are things that everyday people do, and then they kind of become used to sort of those cues or those patterns, and it's not something that is terribly new to them, or something that makes them kind of withdraw or get agitated or throw tantrums. So what it does ultimately is that I think that it will empower them, to express themselves more effectively. So that's then education is another aspect. Epic, having technology that is tailored to persons with autism, or from the time they are diagnosed to when they finish their education, specific technology is important, that is tailored to them. And I think that our population in Nigeria and the level of intelligence that people have in Nigeria, if there was more awareness of autism, I tell you, the level of innovation that will come out of the young people in Nigeria, you just be amazed. The way people are very resourceful and innovative. So but I do think, because there are all these systemic issues, there are gaps in awareness. The innovation might be, even though it's a fantastic thing, it might be lagging behind. So these are some of my thoughts on this. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Ma'am, I have thoroughly, I think one thing I've taken from this conversation more than anything is the fact that this has been a call to action across different tiers of the conversation. It's been a significant call to action, reminding us that there's so much work to do, as long as it pertains to managing autism and people living with autism here in Nigeria. As somebody who's experienced in the health and policy advocacy in Nigeria, I think I would like to get your opinion. I want 3 first-hand implementations, actions you would implement immediately if you had the opportunity to prefer policy policy advancement across Nigeria. What are the first 3 actions you want to see implemented in?
Oh, okay. Thank you for that. I would say, one of our colleagues in the audience, he mentioned this. Sorry. I would say just on one is just kind of free access to kind of medical free access to medical facilities, and free access to diagnoses, and when we talk about early intervention, kind of would I say mechanics, or for in terms of implementation, I would say that there should just be that whole time, when a child is young and you want to diagnose the child, that whole time should be free. In terms of implementation, I would like to see that access to healthcare. The Nigerian Disabilities Act, it says it in one of the sections actually, that they have free access to medical facilities, but in terms of you can have access to medical facility, but do you have access to, do you have free access to that part where they diagnose you with, autism? So I would say that then, free access to education is something that I would like to see for persons with disability. Again, if you compare the number of I don't know in terms of data, I don't know what the numbers are, but I read some things that said 1.2%, in Nigeria. But I don't know how that translates into numbers. Well, there should be, government schools, high quality government schools, or educational facilities. So let me use educational facilities that are free for persons with autism. Is just so important. Like that is so important. Then there should be in terms of implementation. So whilst the law provides that, government organizations should have make this thing for people with disability, make the environment or the institutions conducive, or the offices, and there's a fine. That's not. We don't know the level of implementation. One thing. There was something I just thought about now. There was something I thought about right. You know what? I would like to see. Actually, I would like to see a specialized law on autism. Just that law on autism, not just the Disabilities Act. Okay, that law on autism. It's not something. This is a clear case. There shouldn't be politics or debate about it. There are some things that are, you just have a law on this. To make life more comfortable. So I mentioned 3, yes, but yes, and then I'd like to see like more people kind of held accountable for discrimination. There are more reports in that sort of aspect. So yeah, this is it for me. I hope to think about your questions a bit more and provide more stronger and well-informed answers. Yeah.
To be honest, you have exceptionally well. I'm absolutely impressed. Personally, I've been taking notes. I think I have a full sheet of a lot of things that you have done, that you have mentioned, that I have penned down and looking to relay necessary ones to us as a foundation and just implement personally as I play my own role, ensuring that awareness and advocacy is brought to the conversation consistently. Ma'am, Doc, we have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I want you to wrap up with your final words. Looking forward in the near future, what gives you hope that we are going to build a truly, truly inclusive Nigerian society for persons living with autism? As you wrap up with your final words.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Epic. What gives me hope? I think that let's start with some of the people in the audience. I would say honestly, our young people are a strength for us. The way that the Nigerian youth is growing and evolving and is becoming more aware, I think that they will play a key role in an inclusive society for persons with disabilities or even fundamental human rights issues. So when the more awareness that young people and they have empathy. So look at how people stood up when it came to SARS, end SARS and things like that. So if you think about, I think that young people give me hope. Young people give me a lot of hope. I believe that the more young people are involved in this conversation, the more we can build an inclusive society, the more people want to do things. We have the population on our side. We have young people on our side. So the more there is awareness, the more people can kind of take up that cause. Then I would say, but as I mentioned, and I don't say this for saying sake, I did read up a few reviews on Ike Foundation. And, I know that, the foundation can expand, but people spoke well about, there were good reviews about what AK Foundation is doing. So in terms of providing a space for people with autism, so that's That's something that is important. To have organizations that are doing that is so important. Again, it gives me hope that people are not, just by the sidelines, just kind of saying, okay, let this happen. And I like that it's dedicated specifically to autism, not just not specialized. Yes, is important. It's important to have that specialized. Then, for me, as I just generally wrap up, when you said it's a call to action, it was a call. When I was reading and preparing and thinking about, this conversation, for me, there's something inside me said, Uche, it's a call to action for you. You talk about, so in AI policy, I look at it from an ethical perspective. So I hope that's impactful. But this conversation for me is like, Uche, you need to think a bit more, and do a bit more in terms of publishing and writing in this area, and talking about health law, autism, people with disability. I think that as I wrap up, that's something that the humane side of me is eager to get a crack on. So yes, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, madam. Personally, I'm honored to have held this conversation, hosted this conversation. I am thrilled to have had you on here to join us for over an hour, 35 minutes. It has been a significant opportunity to impact in which policies can have for people living with across Nigeria and Africa and the world at large. You have exhausted every possible facet of the conversation, and we thoroughly appreciate you for that. This has been a thoroughly insightful conversation. So our guests listening who have stayed with us, we want to appreciate you for finding time to do this with us over the past 35 minutes. Indeed, as I said earlier, it's the Lend Your Voice 1000 Voices for Autism series, proudly brought to you by EK Foundation for Autism, a dedicated autism foundation looking to amplify the living conditions of people living with autism in Nigeria and across Africa. We provide early intervention services here in Abuja, Nigeria, to children living on the spectrum, and we are available to attend to all questions and provide any form of assistance people living with autism require. My name is Epic, and I've hosted a conversation with the amazing Dr. Uche Anyamele, who has rounded off this conversation. So we'll catch you next time. Ladies and gentlemen, have an epic rest of your day. Bye-bye. Thank you so much, Doc. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Epic. And to the guests, I think we can connect on LinkedIn. If you have any further questions, we can have these discussions. I'm open and happy to. Thank you so much, Epic. Yeah.
Well said, madam. Have a wonderful day.